Sonia Adelé est chercheur à l'IFSTAR, l'Institut français des sciences et technologies pour les transports, l'aménagement et les réseaux, à Marne-la-Vallée, et dans un laboratoire qui s'appelle le Gretia.
Que je vais présenter.
Que tu présenteras. Voilà,
brièvement.
Voilà. Donc elle fait de la psychologie ergonomique. Voilà, et donc des travaux qui ne sont pas a priori au cœur des actions de l'IRT, parce que nous on est quand même sur la dimension ingénierie et la partie numérique des sujets. Mais vous allez comprendre pourquoi la partie éclairage de sciences humaines et sociales, en particulier la psychologie, sur certains travaux. Et là, Sonia pourra faire l'éclairage sur un voire deux projets de l'IRT. Vraiment nourrit la dimension, nourrit le projet et nourrit la compréhension qu'on a des enjeux pour l'IRT. Voilà.
Okay.
Je te passe la parole.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patrice, for inviting me and introducing me. I'm really sorry, but I will read a lot. It's not the way I imagine a good presentation, but speaking in a non-native language for more than 45 minutes is too difficult for me. So I hope you will forgive me for that and for my outrageous accent, as Monty Python say. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask me at any time during my presentation. To begin, I will briefly present my institute, my lab, and my team. I am a researcher in psychology and ergonomics at IFSTAR. As you must know, IFSTAR is a French public institute specialized in the field of transport, infrastructure, natural hazards, and urban issues. Our aim as researcher, one of our aims, is to contribute to sustainability for me in working on mobility issues. IFSTAR is a large institute because we have more than 1,000 members at 6 sites in France. IFSTAR is structured in 5 departments, and I am a member of the COSIS, Components and Systems, and of the Gretia Lab. Gretia is a multidisciplinary lab whose research focuses on 2 themes. The first is modeling and multimodality. I know Jean-Patrick Lebac has gave you a presentation in November on modeling. The second theme is data and mobility. We are 10 permanent researchers working on mobility analysis and the quality and reliability of transport systems. Our specificity is to use digital traces and qualitative studies to understand the behavior of public transport users, shared mobility users, and so on. As I am specialized in psychology and ergonomics, I did my thesis on the human-technology relationship. I work, among other subjects, on the link between ICTs and mobility and on the adoption of new systems and services. My aim today is to explain what ergonomics is, and as I am French, I will more specifically present you French language ergonomics. To simplify, I will use the term French ergonomics, but in fact, it is also an approach that is used in other French language speaking countries, like Belgium. I hope that at the end of my presentation, you will be convinced that my discipline must be involved in the design of new mobility systems. So I will now give you an international definition of ergonomics. Then I will plunge into the subject that interests us today, French ergonomics. It seems useful to begin with a historical background before defining and articulating the central concepts of task and activity. I will also insist on the crucial role of context in our studies. At the end of this section, I will present the methodologies and conclude by the current point of interest of ergonomics. In the last section, I will give you a more applied vision of French ergonomics in mobility by presenting 3 recently completed research projects. The first project, called SystemX, was on multimodal information and shared mobility. The second was done in the context of the Technological Research Institute SystemX and deals with passengers' behavior during disturbances of the public transport system. The last was a partnership with a startup which was looking to understand the users and the uses of the service it proposes. So first of all, ergonomics. How can we define this discipline? Through its development, the definition of ergonomics given by the International Ergonomics Association has changed. At the beginning, ergonomics was really restricted to the field of work. It's the first idea that comes to mind when talking about ergonomics. Nowadays, ergonomics is exploring a lot of domains from driving to hairstyling, because your performance when you are brushing your hair really matters. Ergonomics is divided into three main domains. Physical ergonomics is concerned with human anatomical, anthropometric, physiological, and biomechanical characteristics as they relate to physical activity. Relevant topics include working postures, material handling, repetitive movement, work-related musculoskeletal disorders, workplace layout, safety, and health. Cognitive ergonomics is concerned with mental processes such as perception, memory, reasoning, and motor response as they affect interactions among humans and other elements of a system. Relevant topics include mental workload, decision-making, skilled performance, human-computer interaction, human reliability, work stress, and training as they may relate to human system design. Organizational ergonomics is concerned with the optimization of socio-technical systems, including their organizational structures, policies, and processes. Relevant topics include communication, resource team management, work design, design of working hours, teamwork, participatory design, community ergonomics, cooperative work, new work paradigms, virtual organization, telecommuting, and quality management. We have now arrived at French ergonomics. Just before and after World War II, the analysis of work was developed in French by two teams whose main area of study was not ergonomics, but psychotechnics and the training of adults. In the laboratory of psychotechnics founded by Laï in the French National Railway Company, SNCF, Paco looked particularly at how tests could be rated and validated. This led her to analyze work in real situations and to conduct observations in the field. In the Centre d'études et de recherche psychotechnique, psychologists selected adult candidates for courses in continuing education. Ombredan, a neuropsychologist, and Faverge, a statistician, examined the limitations of psychotechnic tests, which they found did not correspond to the characteristics of real work tasks. In 1955, they published L'analyse du travail, which is considered to lay the foundations for the subsequent development of ergonomics in the French-speaking world. I cite Ombredan. Two fundamental issues are to be taken into consideration when analyzing work, the what and the how, what workers do and how they do it. On the one hand, we have the requirements of the task, and the other, the operational attitudes and sequences with which the individuals observed really meet these requirements. Under Leplat's direction, the Laboratory of Work Psychology at the École pratique des hautes études began to formalize the concepts of the analysis of work in ergonomic psychology over a period which lasted more than 40 years. At the same time, le laboratoire d'ergonomie du Conservatoire national des arts et métiers, directed by Wissner, underlined the importance of social requests and ergonomic change in the field as being legitimate sources of the production of knowledge in ergonomics. The formal and informal interactions between these two laboratories and the great number of ergonomists and future researchers that they trained have given them a leading role in the formulation of the concepts which underpin ergonomics in the French-speaking world at present. Until 1975, thinking largely followed the word of Faverge, with authors insisting on the need to distinguish what needs to be done, tasks, and what workers really do. At this point in time, the importance of analyzing workers' real behavior was underlined. Attention was paid to gestural sequences, to the way worker processed information, particularly perceptive exploration, the indices used and the regulations implemented. One of the premises of francophone ergonomics is the distinction between task and activity. Leplat said in 1986, "The task is the goal that is set and the conditions in which it should be achieved. Activity is what is undertaken by the subject to accomplish a task. The task is thus the prescribed aspect of work. The activity is the manifest aspect." The idea of activity is a kind of syncretism rapidly developed between the traditional French approach of real behavior in working situations and the Soviet concept of activity, particularly developed by Leontiev in a book entitled Activity, Consciousness and Personality. The ergonomist's general hypothesis is that it's not possible to deal with issues simply by understanding them through the formal description of work in terms used by management or formal procedures. It is a fine understanding of the difficulties that workers encounter in their activity and the adjustments that they implement to deal with variability, which make it possible to associate factors determining activity, its characteristics, effects, and results. Particularly, under the influence of Wissner, it is an intrinsic approach to activity which comes to the fore. For example, the understanding of how this activity is constructed by the given worker as a response to a given context. The worker is not only a human factor, but a human actor. An ergonomic analysis of a situation implies detecting differences between the task and the subject activity. These differences can indicate dysfunctions or inadequacies in the definition of the task. Identifying them consequently allows corrective action to be considered. In this attempt to understand the differences between task and activity, the ergonomist is led to undertake an in-depth context study. For example, SNCF, the French National Railway Company, offers the user some information to manage disruptions. SNCF's starting point is to consider that the user wants to go from his departure station to one of the stations of the line he uses on his usual route. In reality, it is much more likely that the user is trying to get to his destination as efficiently as possible. Therefore, the proposed solutions do not match what is expected and what network users actually do. Regarding activity determinants, activity is influenced by two kinds of factors, those linked with the worker and those linked with the context at different levels, such as society, culture, organizations, tools, technologies, spaces, rules, other humans, and so on. The context is as important as the worker in the understanding of the activity. Soviet activity theory said that actions are always situated in a context and are impossible to understand without that context. This idea is somehow in opposition with approaches based on social psychology, which postulates that the behavior is mainly influenced by attitudes and intentions. In French ergonomics, the context is emergent and not completely conscious for the worker. It orients the activity because it offers resources and imposes constraints on it. Two approaches are often used in French ergonomics: situated action, developed by Lucy Sussman, and distributed cognition by Edwin Hutchins. Those two approaches highlight the role of material and social context in human action and cognition. Logically, ergonomics uses methods from ethnomethodology which permit field studies. The core method is observation, completed by verbalizations. Interviews are also frequently used, with some new types of interviews created. For example, Vermeersch proposes interviews of explicitation to retrieve data from the practitioner's subjective experience in a situation that they have undergone. Claude proposes autoconfrontation. It implies the first phase of activity video recording, followed by an analysis of the video by the worker himself. Some studies also use surveys and logbooks to follow an activity for a long period or an activity that is not observable. Simulation is also used, but more for the study of situations that rarely occur in real life or to control all the parameters of a situation. Because of what I've said previously about the importance of context in French ergonomics, you can imagine that the use of simulation is not unanimously agreed upon because of its artificiality. Today, French ergonomics still studies work, but it has now branched into other domains, like everyday life, by designing services and products, as well as that of user involvement in conception, and even into the field of innovation. Ergonomics not only corrects, but also designed for current and future users. Prospective ergonomics has given rise to new methodological and theoretical questions. How is French ergonomics able to add something without any users or real activity to explore? In the field of mobility, some researchers have solved the problem by studying activities that are similar. For example, studying autonomy management of thermal vehicles in real life and comparing it with a 2-week experimental usage of electric vehicles. This shift from the subject of work to other subjects gives greater importance to different determinants like emotional, affective, and social dimensions. We will now apply the different ideas I have given you about French ergonomics to different research projects on mobility. First, the SystemX project was a set of experiments on innovative mobility services here on the plateau de Saclay. In reality, this project was not completed, but we nevertheless began the work. IFTA was involved as a leader of the task usage analysis. The task's content was to identify the functional and psychosocial determinants of the use of two shared mobility services, dynamic ride-sharing and P2P car sharing. As I am a psychoergonomist, my first objective was to understand real worker mobility in the geographical area of Saclay. You can imagine that I did not intend to observe people during their mobility. For this reason, I decided to conduct in-depth interviews with users of different transport modes. My intention was to identify the link between their real activity and the future services that were to be implemented. The latter would create both resources and constraints for the activity. The main results are: commuters are real strategists. They have to deal with a lot of different parameters, personal constraints, weather, public transport congestion, disturbances, information searching, solidarity between colleagues, avoidance of certain congested areas. Companies also greatly influence mobility by proposing options like telecommuting, schedule flexibility, incentives, and by creating informal norms. Mobility is not only an individual question, it's also linked with the family. Moving is also doing other things, decompressing, working, having time for oneself. In fact, it is clear that mobility is not limited to proposing a new service to be used, and that a broad set of parameters must be taken into account in order for the proposal to be successful. The second project that I will present was carried out as a part of the research project MIC about the modeling and multimodal mobility. The originality of the use case lies in crossing a multimodal transport model and a behavioral model. Concerning the behavioral study, we are interested in how passengers react to incidents that affect their usual lines and the determinants of these reactions. The project considers a limited geographical area in southwestern Paris in which 3 train lines are operated. To understand the choice facing a disruption, we looked at 4 main groups of determinants related to the individual, the personal characteristics, the situation, the reason for the trip, the information, content and time, and the disruption. In fact, these 3 last categories of factors are contextuals. The chosen methodological protocol consisted in several phases, including the first exploratory phase of interviews. The second phase included 2 complementary questionnaires completed by the same people. The first questionnaire was completed only once. It aimed at identifying respondents and their mobility habits. We selected a sample of 470 users. Within these 470 users, 100 completed the second questionnaire. This 5-minute questionnaire could be completed each time the user faced a disruption. The user documented 195 disrupted situations representative of the 15-day survey period. We chose to implement this protocol in order to overcome the impossibility of making observations in real situations. We still have information on real disturbed situations in questionnaire 2. The result of the second questionnaire allows us to understand the behavior of passengers in a real disruption situation. When looking at the number of passengers somehow choosing a solution, we are able to draw a decision threshold of 30 minutes. Facing a disruption lasting more than 30 minutes, a passenger is very likely to change routes or cancel the trip. Finally, our most interesting results lies in the junction of the 2 questionnaires. By comparing different disruptions experienced by the same person and the same disruption experienced by different people, we are able to better understand which factors influence their behavior. These results should be considered with caution because of the sampling size. First of all, behavior depends on the possibilities. The latter are linked with the time the user receives information, for example, when people are still at home, or at work, when they receive the information, they make different choices because the considered set of possibility is different. The behavior is also linked with the accessible public transport solutions at the time of choice making. What other routes are there? For example, people living at the end of a line are more patient because they have less solutions. Secondly, the behavior depends on the situation. Time pressure fosters commuters' proactivity. The characteristic of the disruption, interruption, cancellation of a train or delay widely influence behavior. In this project, by combining declared behavior and behavior in real situations, we managed to add useful inputs to modeling. By paying attention to different types of explanatory factors usually studied in French ergonomics, we were able to show the decisiveness of the context in decision-making. The last project I will present today was a partnership with a young startup proposing a smart ride-sharing app. The principle is to learn your habits to offer you ride-sharing partners without an active research on your part. A large part of the startup team's work is devoted to machine learning. They were interested in different user-related subjects to improve their service. After a state-of-the-art analysis, I analyzed existing data like user feedback call synthesis, use trace like recording instance messaging conversations, and ride-sharing opportunity refusal. I also conducted in-depth interview of explicitation with users to understand their experience. In the state-of-the-art analysis, I discovered a lot of relevant issues, especially about habits changes and smart systems in housing. User experience with Nest, the Google Smart Thermostat, shows that despite initial enthusiasm, users were disappointed in the intelligence. There was an incompatibility between the machine and the user's mental model. users experience a lack of controllability, a mistrust, and an incomprehension. All these problems affected the perceived utility of the system to save energy. With the different analyses, I highlighted different possible improvements for the service, helping the information processing to decide whether a ride-sharing opportunity was good or not, facilitating human-system interaction to build trust, facilitating user relationship in giving some ideas about good practices, and using past user experiences to adapt the service to improve future experiences. The study carried out in this framework made this possible by crossing the use of different methods and data to build solid conclusions that had not been foreseen by the startup's marketing team. To conclude, I would say that French ergonomics brings to the design of mobility systems a systemic understanding of mobility situations, field study methods, a theoretical background based on the distinction between expected behavior, task, and real behavior activity, which permits one to take into account the designer's point of view and the user's point of view. Thank you for your attention. I hope you have some questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious about how you've modeled activities in the SystemX project. What are the relevant elements you picked from observation and interviews? What are the kind of questions you ask people to say that they've made different activities, not only about mobility, but they did other activities during their trip, for example. What are the kind of information you put in your model to get this insight?
In this project, the aim was not to model something. It was just to understand what is real-life mobility in a geographical context. So I just interviewed people and asked questions about what is your mobility, what are you doing when you move, such question, no model. It was just an exploratory phase before another phase, but the project has ended before.
Could we imagine that methods and tools of ergonomics could explain the difference we could see between for a mobility system between the intent to use a system and the real use of system? Could we imagine that the tools you use in ergonomics way could just help us to understand the difference?
In ergonomic, we are not really interested in the link between intention and real behavior, because our interest is really the real behavior. And we think that the behavior is more linked with the situation and the context in which you are, more than your intention to make something.
There is no predictive way, it's just a posteriori.
Studies are not unanimously agreed about the fact that intention can really predict actual behavior. So, in general, the link between I have the intention to use public transport and the reality I will use public transport is really poor, because of a lot of factors that Alexandra has presented too.
Are you taking into account, or are you identifying different types of patterns of behavior as well? Or is it just a general analysis?
In the MIC project, we have made multi-variable analysis in order to highlight some profiles of behavior facing with the description. And we have identified 8 profiles with different characteristics. Some people were students, more young, or white-collar workers with a car, and each profile act differently facing a disruption.
Is it maybe, I'm not a psychologist, you are, but there are specific patterns of reactions in stress situations, so either you attack or you play dead, or are there some kinds of this?
I try to make a link between the personality and the behavior, but I did not find anything. So that's why I am saying that it's more linked with your situation. You must go at 10 to a meeting, or you have a car, or you less with the personality.
Okay.
Mm.
Other question? No. So, thank you very much.